Border Talks. Border Talks.
Hans Leijtens, the Executive Director of Frontex now, entering your third year in service.
Almost. Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
This is also a special milestone. It's the 20th anniversary of Frontex. What would you say are the two or the several most important milestones in Frontex's development? Because it's a work in progress, isn't it?
It is. And it will always be, I guess, a work in progress. I think, well, first of all, the start was not that obvious then, 20 years ago, or even before. That will be an agency like this. But I think right now the most obvious moment in our history is the 2019 regulation, which really changed our existence, our purpose, dramatically, I would say. For the better, by the way, too, because since then we are this executive agency really supporting with tangible people and resources in the field, the member states and third countries. So I think this is really fundamental. We are a uniformed and armed executive agency with executive powers.
But in that sense, if I've understood correctly, more tangibly out there than perhaps previously. In other words,
because
profiles raised.
Yeah, before we were mainly a sort of coordination mechanism, information hub, so more comparable with, I would say, the current Europol, but really sending our own officers employed by Frontex together with Category 2 and 3 member states officers in support of member states, really doing frontline border guarding is something rather new with Frontex. Still, it looks like ages, but it's only here for 5-6 years so far.
Indeed.
Yeah.
The newly minted Commissioner for Migration, Mr. Brunner from Austria, described Frontex as not just a border agency. What did he mean by that?
I think because border agency is often translated into an officer standing at a border waiting for someone to arrive and to check and do whatever is needed. I think first of all we know a lot. We have information, we share it, we call it intelligence about the situation at the borders and beyond. That's number one. Second thing is that we do it in a way that you could name the European standard, which again is not that obvious to have. We are, I think, the only region in the world that has a common standard, also upholding common values. And that's, I think, another interesting part, that the way we do it is not just a standard. It's, I think, it's breathing, it's living European values. And I think everything we do should be really sort of guided by these principles and these values too. So it's not just a technicality. It's really something that has to do with values, with a certain culture, professional standards, but also a professional culture.
And you think that the values and the culture are going to be tested quite strongly again as we're watching political development sweep through the world, that Frontex will be able to play that dual role of upholding secure borders as well as fundamental human rights.
Yeah, but I think let's make it also smaller. I mean, the officer standing at the border, how do you engage with a migrant? What are the, let's say, the ways to do it? What is the dignity involved with that? It's not only about this high values, written down in important documents and in a vault somewhere in Brussels. It also has to do with day-to-day work. Yeah? So the use of force, the communication, how we approach migrants or anyone who's crossing our borders, how we cooperate with member states, the language we speak, literally the language, but also how do we communicate. So it's more than just a technicality. It's a way of working, I would almost say a way of living this profession too. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. It's walking the talk, isn't it?
It is.
Which
I
think you had said previously was something
is.
that words are one thing, but actually...
Yeah, and I think that is perhaps the most important thing. It's not just adding capacity to and capabilities to Europe's border force. It's also delivering something that really makes sense in terms of sense making, not only to our people, but also to the sort of the hosting agencies and the migrants we're working with.
To that point, how has or is Frontex adopting its strategy to address the complexities of today's migrant flows, which are evolving? They're shifting. Those lines are shifting, aren't they?
Yeah, but that's for me. That's a fact of life. I mean, people often ask me, so the current situation. There's always a current situation. I think for us, it's important to deliver the professional solutions that are needed in any situation. And of course, we have to adapt to what's happening now and tomorrow. But I think building this sort of baseline in terms of practices, in terms of values, and how do we operate, how do we deploy officers, which profiles. I think it's sort of, it's not steady state, but it's a, again, evolving every day, but it needs a firm hand to make sure that it will be there tomorrow and the day after.
Let's drill down a little bit. Where would you say where and why will the migrant flows and the ongoing movements be important in 2025? Where and why?
Yeah, well, to start with, migration is there, right? It will not go away. Yeah? It's always there. It's part of humanity, I would say. What we see right now is that we see a decrease in the central Mediterranean route, and we see a decrease in what we call the Western Balkan route. So that's let's say, from Bulgaria and Greece up north to the western part of the Balkans. I think it makes sense to connect these without sort of claiming any fame for this, that what we are doing there right now, both in talking with third countries and cooperating, either with tangible officers in the field, but also in, well, sharing our practices, sharing our surveillance, our intelligence, if possible, due to the regulatory framework. What we do see an increase. That's Western Africa right now, so from Senegal, Mauritania, and the Gambia towards the Canary Islands, Spain. And we see an increase, but that's not big numbers, but it's percentage-wise, which is the eastern borders. So meaning, let's say, Russia, Belarus towards the west. The second one is a specific phenomena, because it has to do with two things. That's Ukraine and the people running for conscription. And the other one is indeed, let's say, sort of a flow that has moved from up north. Well, we think there's still a stock of migrants living or staying in northern Africa, but they chose the sub-Saharan countries to go west and to use this route because it's apparently right now more attractive than going north for different reasons. This is a phenomena that's here to stay, because what we see, the potential sub-Saharan, let's say, for migration is big for numerous reasons, but it's big. So it has chosen to go a different direction, but it's still there. The what they call instrumentalization of migration in the east is a specific phenomenon, which also requires from us a specific reaction, answer.
In terms of reactions, answers, and developing behaviors, how would you describe Frontex's most recent lessons learned in coordinating with EU member states on this balance between humane and robust interdiction in order to mitigate the effects of this kind of migration?
Yeah. Well, to start with, I think we really make a difference, both in adding capabilities to the national force, but also being there and also safeguarding, so to say, that we do it in the way we agreed to do it in Europe. So I think right now what we see, that one of the assets that's really delivering a lot of results is our aerial surveillance. And then what we call pre-frontier, meaning not in the border zone, but more upstream, specifically North Africa. The fact that we know right now that we can see, that we can inform member states on migratory flows, and also can inform countries all across when there is a search and rescue case, for example, I think it's adding a lot of value. I would like to have more assets that deliver this service. Maritime and also land borders. I think this is adding a lot of value. Second thing is, what we see is that it's always a mixture between human resources and technical equipment. So we have to balance this and keep on doing this, because adding people as such does not always deliver a lot of value. Adding it in terms of an integrated solution, that's perhaps a bit technical, but that's what we need. We need equipment, not only cars and vessels, but also surveillance technology platforms that inform our officers where to go and how to do the job.
Right. What would you say, talking about automation and IT, is the progress that you could share on Frontex's biometric systems, automated border controls that are coming to the fore? And where do you see the progress over time when you compare it with other parts of the world?
I don't think that there is much to compare in terms of who's up front and who's leading and lagging. I mean, I think what you see across the world is the same phenomena that we, depending on the area, I mean, what we see is that in the aerial environment, airport, for example, there's much more urgency felt to improve, to digitalize, because for the simple reason that the square meters you have there to do your job are limited by definition, and airports have an interest in not to allow you to spend more square meters to put your booth there. So there it's more about passenger flows, and automation is the way to go. Automation meaning automating the process, but also having more information up front to do a better and faster decision-making process at the border. So I think in general, audio automation and everything we request from passengers is meant to inform us to make a sort of first screening to make sure that those who deserve our attention will get it. Right now, looking at technology, what you see is that everything more or less can be already done remote. So we can check your fingerprints, your iris already remote. So the technology is there, integration and having confidence that the technology will deliver, I think is still difficult because there's a lot at stake. I mean, if we miss someone because we are not able to, for example, remotely check someone his fingerprints, for example, or iris, then and you miss the terrorist, then you're in problems. So there's a lot at stake. But I feel, and I also hear from my colleagues across Europe that there is some progress, there's some confidence that technology can deliver. But that's, I think, right now still the most important thing. Is it a sustainable and is it an effective way to do our work? I mean, there will be always people involved. It will not be automated completely, I guess.
What would you say this shifting, in fact, the expanding Schengen area now with Romania and Bulgaria having now joined the area, set against the fact that some member states, particularly Germany, have set in new internal controls, if only at the moment, temporarily, and motivations can also be discussed, but how do you see that evolving in the course of this year? Because many people are scratching their heads and wondering, where does exterior and external borders actually mean anymore? What does that mean?
Well, I won't surprise you if I say that I'm a big supporter of the external borders. They should do the job to start with. And I think we are already confident and we have huge experience and very good experience with both Romania and Bulgaria. They are doing their job. We can improve, together we can, for sure, but I think they're up to standard. So I have no doubt that they will do their job like they did in the past. So what is of course, being removed is the internal borders. Well, right now they are internal borders. So I think I'm confident with that. If you look at the internal border checks, I think in the Netherlands, where I come from, we did it together with the Germans for a while. But to have a sort of sense of what is crossing our borders, our internal borders. Real border checks, I don't see them right now, meaning closed borders and only via specific border crossing points that you can enter a country. I think right now what we see is more or less random checks for a couple of hours. That is more than is foreseen in the Schengen Treaty, of course, but I think it serves a purpose more on a national level than it serves a purpose on the European level, because again, we want to rely fully on the external borders, and I think that really makes sense.
So in short then, more exception than the rule of having these occasional...
Oh, yeah, sure. Because I think everyone feels that if you would sort of institutionalize these border checks, this will, well, damage, I would want to say kill, but damage the Schengen Treaty. And the whole idea of having this open space, for all of us.
Right. How has Frontex's work, we're coming up towards the end here, but how has Frontex's work with humanitarian organizations and NGOs evolved to ensure that migrants' rights are respected during operations? And can you give one or two examples?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we cooperate with them. So part of our work we do together with them. And let me give the number one example is the post-return activities, meaning the activities we deploy when people are returned, voluntary or non-voluntary, and they want to, well, sort of rebuild their lives. And for this, with right now I think 35 countries, we have an agreement with specifically NGOs that supply this service on our behalf to help people to rebuild their lives. So we're sort of cooperating, I think, structurally with them on this. On let's say the front side of the issue, we meet, and of course we have, and we also have to acknowledge that we have a different perspective, I would say, on the issue. We are here to protect borders, meaning that we are the ones who enforce borders, do it in a way, I think, that again breathes these European values. But I think quite often we meet too. and not only NGOs but also IOs like IOM and UNHCR. We meet, we talk, we discuss. We have them on board in our so-called consultative forum, so that's an independent advisory board consisting of civil society representation that helps us to understand, but also to take their perspective on board. So we're not enemies, but we're neither on the same page in terms of tasking and mandate. So we have a very specific mandate. I meet them regularly, most of the time off the record, because they also have a sort of, they don't want to sort of be connected with Frontex in terms of, well, they are connected and they always say. So we disagree sometimes, and that's okay with me, because again, if we respect that it's a different perspective, but if we also acknowledge that we believe in the same values, although we have different roles to play, I think this is fine with me.
So in terms of effectiveness, in a brief sentence, the mutual benefits of having a good relationship between Frontex and the NGO world and IO world will continue. In other words, the trend seems to be towards greater respect, greater understanding?
Yeah, I think respect, but that sounds like sort of, I respect you, and we do, of course. But I think, and it's not about merging activities. It's about accepting and respecting that we have roles to play, that they're not sort of in conflict with one another, that we have a job to do, and they also respect our job. I think that's also clear when I talk with them. They know that we are the European Border and Coast Guard agency. So it's coexisting, sometimes co-creating, and for example, the example just gave on post-return activities. So I think, well, we're here. That's part of our, what they call ecosystem, and that's okay.
Very briefly, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 priorities for Frontex over the next 5 years?
Well, if the plan of the president and the commissioner to allow us to grow even further to 30,000, it's clear that we have to prepare and execute part of it. I do not expect it to happen within these 5 years, but I think first of all it's important that, again, like I said before, we're only doing this mandate like 5-6 years right now, and we're doing quite good actually. I'm very proud of what we're doing right now, but we have to strengthen some more foundational processes to allow ourselves to grow, because this next phase is really very challenging, I can tell you. So we need
In a word, what are those foundational?
No, it's about simple things like financial management. It's about recruitment. It's about operational safe and healthy. It's about having the right equipment in place. So again, it's basic in terms of, well, you should make sure that they can facilitate, accommodate the growth we are foreseeing right now. Because what we did so far, and again, very happy with the result, is improvise. We have to we run into a problem, like for example, we had to procure weapons. We never did this before. Okay, how do we do this? You beg, borrow and steal from member states, and can you tell me how we do it? And even then, being European agency, doing that is new to us. And so what we're doing right now, preparing right now, is do 3 things together with my executive management team. First of all, learn from the first 10,000. What can we do better? Define the end state, meaning what do we want to be and have then when we would have the 30,000. And that's not only about people, but also about equipment, processes, the whole thing. And third, how to get there. So I think these are 3 important questions that will need every single part of our energy for the next years, while the shop will remain open. So we can't close the shop for a while and do these things and then come back. So I think this will be quite challenging.
Finally, what message would you leave for EU taxpayers who are looking to know that they're getting best value for money, especially at a time of a greater scope and scale of Frontex activities? What can you say to them?
I think, first of all, Frontex is an executive agency, so that means that we deliver tangible resources to member states to do the actual job. So we don't talk about it, we don't write about it, we deliver something tangible in the field. And it's not only about managing migration, managing borders as in terms of migration, but also managing the security of Europe. Having Frontex at the borders means that we add security to the whole European member states, the brotherhood, I would say, and everything living and working in Europe. So I think this is really something tangible. Again, it's not a theoretical thing; it's a practical thing we do. And let me just give an example. So last year we had the Olympics in Paris and the championships, soccer championship in Germany. In both cases, we provided resources. In France, more than 200 officers of Frontex joined the French in protecting the European borders, not only to monitor and to intervene on migration, but also to make sure that everybody's checked at the border, that the databases are used to check whether people can be a threat to Europe and to this event. So I think what we talk about is really delivering a lot of bang for the buck, meaning we have a budget, but we use it not to sort of create something in theory, but really delivering something at the borders. And again, people can meet us at every border in Europe, air, sea, land. It can be in Moldavia. Right now in Moldavia, we are standing next to our Moldavian colleagues at the Ukraine border, doing first-line checks, checking passports, checking databases, stamping passports. So again, people don't always see it perhaps, but we're everywhere. And right now, 3,000 officers in more than 20 locations doing, again, first-line border work, helping in returns. I think there is a very practical contribution we deliver for the security of Europe.
And visibility, of course, we expect to see raised.
Yeah.
You'll have a higher profile. We're
To
going to be
start with.
seeing and tangibly feeling more your presence.
Right now, 3,000. We will have in the future the capacity of 10,000. Not all of them will be seen at the border at the same time, but you can expect to at least see the double of it in the future. So 5,000-6,000 officers wearing either a uniform from Frontex or recognizable of being part of the Frontex staff. I think that people will see this for sure. Again, whatever border you use, air, land, sea, you will meet us.
Hans Leijtens, thank you very much.
Thank you.